What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the feed to Embiid. I am your host, Austin Krell. You can find me on Twitter at NBA Krell, along with my partner, Brock Landis. Brock, you can find him on Twitter at Landis Brock. How are we doing today? My
I'm
good
doing all right, Austin. I appreciate you having me.
You say that like as if you're not the co-host and like a
Oh,
daily.
usually the way it goes, like I say, is you facilitate. You're the floor general of the podcast. You ask the questions, you check the chat, you give me the plot points. I just show up and do Brock Landis.
I am the Mike Connolly of the podcast.
Yeah. And for anyone that doesn't know, Austin and I last episode had a passionate argument about Mike Conley as to why he's not an all-star, in my opinion, in Austin's opinion, why he was an all-star, and ultimately he didn't make it. I'm not a validation guy. I don't need to toot my own horn. But it was a fun debate. So if you didn't watch it, make sure to check the last episode out.
That's right. Well, we do have a lot to discuss since that last episode. Sixers go, I believe, they go let's see, 2-1, 2-2.
1-1 against Toronto. They beat Dallas, so that would be 2-1, and then they lose to Cleveland. So 2-2 since that podcast.
Right. So let's just dive into that Toronto series real quick. Well, I guess this would be the Tampa series. I think for me, just they couldn't make a shot down the stretch of that fourth quarter. And I mean, how often do you see teams that are like, teams that are playing playoff level teams? How often do you see them go through like a 7-8 minute dry spell without a field goal in the fourth quarter, and they end up pulling that game out? It doesn't happen. You have to make shots down that stretch to beat playoff level teams, and they just didn't make shots down the stretch of that game. I think Tobias was like 1 of 9 from 3 that game. They had open looks, they just didn't make them. But I thought their ball movement was generally fine, and I think as long as you have good ball movement, you're going to live with the shots that you get, even if they're misses from deep. I just think some games you can live and die by that, and other games it's just sort of not an amalgamation, but a coming together of all of the things that have sort of compounded over the course of a season. And I think right now we're starting to get one of the central themes of this team is that not only do they miss threes, but they'll have games where they'll have at least a game a week where they're 4 of 20 from deep and heading into the fourth quarter. And so they're not taking enough threes. They're not making enough threes, and now it's becoming like a part of their identity where like this team is just not a high volume shooting team. They also don't make a high volume of threes, and I think it's starting to hurt them a little bit.
Well, for me, I think the Toronto series was very telling. And heading into the series, you've got one of, if not the hottest teams in basketball in Toronto. I think they were second in almost every major statistical category. So they had the second best record, the second most points, second most threes made, etc. It's a hot team, and the difference between Toronto and any other team in the league is their defensive rotation. Everyone kind of moves on a string. So no matter what happens, if they double, if they triple, if there's a scramble, there will be a Raptor getting out on a shooter. And that's important because they're applying pressure. They're doubling, and then if you do have an open look, there's going to be a closeout. So you have to capitalize on those open opportunities. That's the most important thing. Now, with a team like Philly, their attack is bully ball. It's a very simple attack. We don't think you can guard Embiid one-on-one. We don't think you could guard Tobias one-on-one, and we don't think you could guard Ben one-on-one in space. Now, whoever's going to get double-teamed, it's up to them to find the open shooter. If they don't find the open shooter, put it into the hands of a player around the perimeter and let them swing the rock. The Sixers have the second most passes in all of basketball. The movement is there. And even with a team like Toronto that has this tight defensive rotation, they still had to scramble. because they got to double Joe. They got to double Ben. They got to double Tobias. Joe only made 6 shots from the post in both games combined. But here's what these games came down to. In the first one, the Sixers missed 10 3-pointers out of double teams. That's the game right there. Curry, Tobias, you alluded to it, they both had uncharacteristic shooting nights. The second game against Toronto, they made 9 first-half 3-pointers made. They're 12-0 this season, undefeated in the 12 games where they have 6 or more first-half threes. So you might think, what's the correlation between making 6 first-half threes or more and winning for the Sixers? Well, here's what it is. If teams double Joe, if they double Ben, if they double Tobias, I just told you there'll be open shots. If the Sixers come out early and hit those open shots, they set the tone. If the Sixers make those shots, there's implications. It means either defensively you got to double those 3 Sixers less, or you're just going to keep giving up threes. And if the Sixers are hitting them, they're going to continue to create separation on the scoreboard. So I think this series was very telling. I'm not worried about Joel Embiid at all. It was a very tough physical matchup for him. Aaron Baines is still 7 feet tall. He's still got a 7'2", 7'3" wingspan, and he's not a pushover. He's an Aussie, and there's an Aussie, 2 of them on the Sixers, and you know that they're probably 2 or 3 of the strongest guys in the club. So it was a tough physical series for Joe, but otherwise I thought Philly did pretty well. They responded to those doubles and triples and bounced back in the second game. And Ben Simmons is just a ball player. It's that simple, Austin. Ben Simmons is a hooper. You're muted. It's like I'm in Zoom class. This is what they got to do every time I'm in class. They got to remind me I'm on mute.
So I think, like you said, that they missed how many threes out of doubles? Was it 10?
10, yeah.
And you said it was an uncharacteristic performance. Mm-hmm. I think like one of the things there that my point is, I don't know that it's so uncharacteristic anymore, because even though Seth Curry is like, the league leader in 3-point percentage or whatever it is, and Tobias Harris is shooting 41.1%, Danny Green is still leading the team in 3-point attempts per game, and that therefore volume at 6 per game, and he's leading by over a shot per game. So Curry's only taking 4.5 threes per game. Tobias Harris is shooting 4.1 per game. The percentages are good, but they're not like if you give them the volume, it hasn't been pretty, on those and from time to time there. And I think, last night you saw it. We'll get into last night's game too, but I think that the percentages kind of tell a different story than like what the fact is that they have some timid 3-point shooters besides Danny Green. Tobias isn't really shooting them that much anymore. Seth isn't really shooting them as much as he should. And I look, when those are your main 3-point shooters, your volume isn't going to be where it needs to be. And I think one thing that Toronto game just kind of taught me, that first game, was that, number one, like, okay, they went on a stretch without making a shot. That's going to happen from basketball time to time. The good thing is that they get to the line a lot, and that kind of was their saving grace. And why the Raptors weren't able to completely pull away with that game, even though it was a game the Sixers should have won. I also thought that was a game where they kind of played down to the level of competition, because after the game I straight up asked Tobias Harris about it, and I said, at what point do you get on? Do you decide, okay, we got to give Chris Boucher a little extra attention because he's made 2, 3, 4 threes in a row? And he was like, yeah, we should have gotten out there after the second. So clearly they kind of weren't focused on the task at hand in that game at some points. And I think that they just kind of, the energy, and I think, I'm not saying Joel hasn't given great energy all season. Like he's obviously been unbelievable. Like he's been, energy has not been a problem for him this year like it was last year or even in the past, where he turns the ball over a lot, misses some shots, doesn't get a call, and you can just see him kind of like pack it in. Like he's been great all season long, but I also thought that with him unable to make a shot, the rest of the team kind of just sort of like didn't really take it upon themselves to bail to bail out when he had a bad game. And I do want to give the Raptors credit for one thing in that game. They've kind of perfected the art of defending Joel Embiid in that they'll send an extra help defender over at the very last second. Oftentimes it's Fred VanVleet, but Joel will get the ball on a deep catch, and typically those deep catches are money for him. Like it's over. It's an automatic deposit. The Raptors will send Fred VanVleet over at the last second, and he'll put an aggressive slap down on the ball.
Yeah.
And Embiid's not seeing it, and so it ends up being like going off of his foot, or like he turns it over, it doesn't get a shot off, and then it happens once or twice, and suddenly he thinks to himself, "I have to move faster here. I got to get up with the shot much quicker," and then he's sort of rushing shots that he was missing a lot around the rim this whole week, and it was certainly the case in the Toronto series. But I think the Raptors have figured out a way to sort of limit him in some ways.
Here's what I'll say. Right to your first point, love Fred VanVleet. I thought he should have been an all-star. I mean, he's 6'1". He's a whole foot shorter than Embiid, so he's a dog. He's going to get in there and give Embiid problems when he's not expecting it. But Toronto gets a lot of credit because their defensive rotations are awesome. I mean, you've got a double as soon as Embiid touches the ball, and then they'll have a player run across the length of the entire half court to get out on a shooter, and the defense just rotates based according to that. The thing I saw was that Toronto didn't want Embiid to get into a rhythm, and they made that clear from the first game, which continued all the way until the fourth quarter. The second game, the Sixers, they play bully ball in Toronto, did not want them to beat them with Joel Embiid or Ben Simmons bullying them. So what they did was just send these double blitzes at Embiid as soon as he touched it. And instead of him getting positioning or getting to spots where he's automatic, they were forcing him into making quick decisions and turning him into an accurate passer. That's what Embiid had to turn into. I mean, so doubles coming, you got to kick that ball and hope your players can make those shots or swing it. Accurate passer. That's what what's going on there. We all right?
Yeah, good.
But nonetheless, Philly responded well to the rotation. I don't think Toronto has Embiid figured out. No team will stop Embiid. Embiid had two of his worst shooting performances of the season against Toronto and his third against Dallas. The Sixers went 2 of 1 in those games. But Embiid had a tough physical matchup against Baines. The Sixers had their second and third highest totals of three-pointers attempted in the Toronto game. So what that tells me is the shots are there. Embiid was making the right passes out of the double teams, but the Sixers just couldn't capitalize. And that was the story of the first game compared to the second. First game, they missed 10 threes out of doubles. The second, they make 9 first-half threes. So the proof is in the pudding. The Sixers have the talent and the size to beat anybody, or at least compete with anybody. Other than, I'd say, Brooklyn, the Lakers, and the Clippers, maybe, the Sixers have 2 of the 3 best players on the floor at all times. If you look at Phoenix, if you look at Utah, if you look at Boston, if you look at Denver, all of the contending teams outside of Brooklyn, the Lakers, and maybe the Clippers, I think the Sixers have 2 of the 3 best players. You add Tobias, who's 20 a game on 50% shooting about, they're going to bully teams, and you can't match up with that, right? But what has to happen is the Sixers got to hit those threes when the shot opportunities are there. When the number advantages are in favor of them, when the threes are there, they got to hit them. So for me, it's not a lack of volume. It's just if you only have 10 threes a game that you got to hit at least 7 of them. You got to hit at least 8 of them. And that's what the good teams do. That's what Brooklyn, what Utah, that's what the Clippers do. The Sixers right now are at about 34% there. So Austin, I think once they start to capitalize and hit those threes, they're blowing teams out. The problem is, are Danny Green and Seth Curry the players to consistently do that for Philadelphia?
Yeah, like I think you make some really good points there. That Toronto game, I thought there was like a lot of underscoring sort of components of that game that are problematic for this team. Until they make some moves, but let's move on to the next Toronto game. Let's move on to the Dallas game. Before we do that, we want to check in on some of our fans. Kevin says, "Hey, thanks for stopping by, Kevin." Ben Butler, morning from Aussie. Ben
Go.
usually hits a 3 to finish. What a season! How about that?
You know what, bro? You know what? Here's what I took away from that. Okay, and a lot of people turn into therapists and sports psychologists and shot doctors when Simmons shoots. But here's what I took away from this. Honestly, Simmons pulled up and hit that shot with ease. That was enough space to get the shot off, hit it. It was money. It was water. Here's what I think. Simmons for 3 seasons has been telling the media, telling the fans, telling everyone until he's sick and blue in the face that I'm a high IQ basketball player. What I try to do is generate the highest percentage shot on the floor, whether that's a Danny Green 3, a Tobias cutting layup, a Joe mid-range, whatever it is. Simmons is trying to generate the highest percentage shot on the floor when he's facilitating. What that shot told me is that he can shoot, the form is there, and it's in his game. But he doesn't think that he needs to use it right now because there's a higher percentage shot on the floor. And in my opinion, that's what a smart basketball player would do. That's what a Magic Johnson would do. That's what a Scottie Pippen or a Jason Kidd would do. Ben thinks I probably can shoot a 3, but if I'm only going to make it at 28, 30%, why waste the possession when I can give a guy that shoots 38, 40% a higher chance to make it? That's what that shot told me.
Damn, he just left a comment. What the fuck?
Well, Ben Butler's a good fan. He usually shows love on my channel in the Painted Lines as well. So Ben, I know you enjoyed that one. Much love.
Justin says, "OMG, are you guys famous? Can I get your autographs?" Always, if you come to me for an autograph and ask for it, I will be taken aback by it. But I'll also
listen. This is a big day for you, Krell. Right? So you're on the beat. JP's asking for autographs, and now I'm interviewing you for my class project as a sports media professional. It's a big day for you. The only thing that can make this better is that blue check for you on Twitter you've been longing for.
That's right.
We're still working for that for you.
Going back to what Ben Butler says, can I just tell you, I don't have any kind of like sourced information on this or like anyone whispering this to me. I just think that like what this season has showed us, like think about how quickly with Sam Cassell, Ben is like turned into like an okay post player.
Okay. You know? He's deadly. He's deadly in the post.
A good post player. Clearly, if he puts in the work, he can do it. I think this season has taught me that the 3-point shot, he's done a good job of spicing up some videos in the past, but I don't know that I believe so much that he's ever really worked on it in the way that people think he has. Some people think he has, at least.
To your point about the post game, I mean, Simmons is up to a career high 56% on hook shots. So he's making almost 6 out of every 10 hook shots. And from the post in the past month, he has the second highest field goal percentage. He's over 70% from the post. So right now what you're seeing is a 6'9", 6'10" guy that plays point from his position, growing into his body and understanding, okay, I have a mismatch every time I touch the ball. It's time to attack that. Let's get busy. And I think it's an entire sum of things. So you mentioned Sam Cassell. I was talking to my dad, and he kind of helped me come up with this. But Doc played over a decade in the league when Magic was in his prime. Doc played specifically against Magic. Sam Cassell caught Magic in his last season. Popeye Jones played against Magic in Magic last season. He was 36, but nonetheless, they both saw him. And Dan Burke, who's also a Sixers assistant head coach, was an assistant coach out west for Magic's last 3 seasons. Doc said on film that Ben reminds him of Magic, and that was 3 years ago. So right now you're seeing a coaching staff that has Ben's development in their hands, and it's real hands. It's not Brett Brown and the other guys that were in charge of things last year. These are real former basketball players, real basketball geniuses that have Ben's development in their hands, and they're tapping into that potential.
For sure. Jay Digga says Ben should start taking those shots on nights our shooters are struggling like Seth was last night. I had to, when I read his name, I had to like pause for a second to make sure that it actually said D and not something else, because I was like, I don't want to.
Listen, man, you make that mistake, I'm hitting this leave studio button.
I really don't want to drop that by accident and have us reading his name. Thank God it said that, not something else. but no, I mean, he definitely shouldn't start taking threes like that. I just, what's the value in that? I don't see the value in that.
That's my point. When Ben says he's trying to get the higher percentage shot, if Ben thinks he's only going to make 3-point shot at 32, 34% success, why not give it to a guy that's maybe going to hit it with 38, 42% success? So on those nights where the Sixers shooters aren't making their 3-point shots, there's no substitute. You just have to hit those shots. If teams are going to double and sell out defensively, you need to make them pay. There's no substitute.
Yeah. I just don't think like seeing other guys taking and missing threes is a reason for Ben Simmons to suddenly think, oh, I should do this too. I don't understand why, or no, I don't. Let me rephrase. I don't think that would be a wise train of thought for Ben Simmons to follow.
No, but Austin, a wise train of thought before we get to Justin's comment would be getting your hands on one of these things. All right. This is a King Cobra. And if you like shotgunning beer, this is right up your alley. If you want to increase your shotgunning time at parties, you got to check my boys out at the King Cobra. The King Cobra is a shotgunning tool that makes the perfect shotgunning hole with this thing right here in just 1 second or less. It's also a tab puller, vent puncher, and fits all on a keychain. For more information about the King Cobra, check them out on IG at the King Cobra Co. That's the King Cobra Co. And Cobra is spelled with a K. For a 10% discount on all products, enter the code TrustTheCobra10, all caps, one word. Pick yours up today.
That's right. Justin Persichetti says something you see is when Ben had a mismatch prior this year, he would still look to pass. Yeah, no, I agree. Now he looks to, yeah, he's been really good at that this year and sort of sniffing out those opportunities and executing them. That's for sure. Yeah, look at Brock with the ad read. He says. Yeah. Like a pro. We'll get back to the questions and the comments in a little bit. Jamison Taylor says, "Hey guys, thank you for stopping by, Jamison. We appreciate you." Let's go to the Dallas game, and obviously, I think Ben clearly got up for that game. Joel continued to struggle a little bit. It's not always that like the athletic bigs or the bruising bigs pose a problem for Joel. A lot of times it's just like the taller guys with the long hands like Boban has. Those can be problematic for him too. And it makes sense. I mean, if the longer arms you have, the better you'll be able to contest the shot, no matter what the guy does with the ball on the ground. But Joel kind of struggled still in this game. And this was really the Ben Simmons fest. I thought he just came out and he gave Luka very little space. There were a couple times when like they let Ben sort of take a break and played him off of Luka, but Luka came back and would hit threes to sort of bring Dallas back into it. As soon as they put Ben back on him, he was silent. I think he had 4 turnovers. Mm-hmm. What was it? 3 threes he made?
No, he didn't make any threes. He made 3 buckets, but no threes. He missed all of them.
Yeah. That's right. He was 0 of 3. And what was he, like 107, I want to say? 3
of 7. 4 misses, 4 turnovers.
Okay. So yeah, I mean, Ben did a fabulous job on Luka. What did you see there?
What I saw was Ben clamping up, and that's an incredible thing that we can look at Ben and look at somebody on the schedule and just think, well, we've got a defensive player that's just going to completely neutralize them. What I saw with Ben and also the Sixers was taking Luka's dribble away and making him uncomfortable. So Luka didn't hit any threes, and that's the 3rd All-Star that Simmons held to 3 or less buckets in a single game in the month of February alone. It was Damian Lillard, Donovan Mitchell, and Luka. So Ben has gone through a den of monsters, and he's completely neutralized them. Luka, you mentioned, had 4 turnovers. He also had 4 turnovers against Ben last season, and it was his highest total of first-half turnovers all season this year. What happened was the Sixers were doubling on screens. They were either hedging or doubling. So what you're doing there is you're keeping Ben Simmons on Luka, and you're bringing your big up to take that dribble away. So it was as simple as that. Either make him pick his dribble up and pass, put the ball into the hands of his teammate, or just make him make bad decisions. And that's why he had so many turnovers. The Sixers just applied a lot of pressure. And when you've got two guys that are 7 feet tall hawking you down, when you've got two guys 7 feet hawking you down all the time, it's tough to get into a rhythm. And they kept Luka out of rhythm the entire night. Ben Simmons, Austin, I'm running out of things to say. I mean, you've been pretty supportive of Ben for the better half of a year, 2 years now. But I don't think anybody has been more supportive of Ben through good and through bad than I have been.
I would agree with that.
It's just beautiful to see everything materializing. And for me, it never came from a place of like misguided potential. Like I never saw something in Ben that I didn't think he couldn't do. I didn't see a guy that's going to be pulling up, taking mid-range J's in people's mitts. I saw his athletic ability, what he brings on the basketball floor, how he contributes every way. And if he can do that to his best ability every night, he's one of the most impactful players in the league. And I just think it's super important that Joel Embiid had 3 of his worst shooting performances all season, 2 games against Toronto and the one against Dallas, and yet the Sixers still came out of it 2-1. That's telling me that the guys around Joe are getting better. All right. And Ben, in the past month, 20 points per game, 7 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 steals a game. He's getting to the line 6 times a game, making about 70% of his 3 throws. In the past couple of games, I think 5 or 6, it's up to like 25 points a game, 9 free throw attempts at almost 80%. So what you're seeing with Simmons is just him comfortable in an environment. You've got a ton of coaches breaking his game down to a science, and they're just making it easy for him to play. They're not complicating the game. And Ben is just letting the game come to him and just dominating that way. And I think it's really important to give Ben his flowers right now because he's hooping. I mean, him and Joe have like a 120 offensive rating in the first half and like a 14 net rating. Like they're beating opponents by 14, 15 points in the first halves of most games because of how good this duo is playing together. So they've completely changed the narrative. And I love that after this game, Ben Simmons gets up on national TV and starts talking shit with his chest. He tells Shaq, Chuck, Ernie, anybody who can criticize Ben and who has criticized Ben, I'm the best defensive player in the league. I can guard 1 through 5. I have a high IQ. And you guys know if you can hoop, you can hoop. That's all I wanted to see out of Ben.
Do you think he can guard 1 through 5? Because I don't.
I think he can guard 1 through 5 with an asterisk, right? He can guard 1 through 4 without a doubt. 1 through 4, he'll have no problem with. 1 through 5 is a little different. I think there's centers that might have a little more muscle than he does and are just more better post technicians than Ben is a post defender. So when you get those couple of bigs like AD or Nikola Jokic, maybe even Rudy Gobert down low, Ben would have a tough time. But against the center like Aaron Baines, Ben looks strong. So there's an asterisk next to that 5, but 1 through 4 is no question.
Yeah, for sure. Felix says, just to give you guys some love from Argentina. You guys are very good at what you do. We do appreciate that. They're very kind of you. I wonder how we would fare down in Argentina. Do you think we'd be famous in Argentina? I think we could. I think we could be.
I think I'm already famous over in Australia, bro. I think I'm famous in Australia already.
It'd be hilarious. Like one day I go to visit one of these countries, and I'm like there with my family, and all of a sudden someone runs up to me, man, like I know you from the podcast.
Austin Krell, I know you from the feed to Embiid.
Yeah,
you're like the hell's wrong with you for watching it?
That'd be wild. Let's talk about that Dallas game. So Josh Richardson is exactly who he was last year. I mean, I one of my pet peeves with athletes, like I don't have many, but one of them is when someone starts complaining about accountability or role when they're not even that good of a player. Like last year, Josh Richardson was going off about how like there's no accountability, there's this, there's that. And I'm thinking to myself, well, who's going to hold you accountable for not being able to dribble, but over dribbling and making terrible decisions and just not even being remotely as good as you thought you were. So, I mean, listen, he dribbles through traffic aimlessly. He has no idea where he's going with the ball. Most of his best possessions are like him pulling up for like a free throw line jumper. I mean, he's just not nearly the player that I think he thinks he is or that he was after he left Miami.
I don't know, man. You've always said this about Jay Rich, right? And I feel you. Like, I'm not with all the complaining stuff too, but I just think with Jay Rich, it's like he had a point. Ben on national TV said there's accountability this year. Joel Embiid said there's accountability this year. Doc is making sure everyone knows their role, and there's accountability top to bottom. Tobias Harris on his ESPN interview a week or two ago said there's accountability. So it's true. There was little to no accountability last year compared to this season. It's night and day. You've got a president of basketball ops that knows what he's doing, and he understands the winning culture. One of the most winningest president of basketball ops in the game in the past decade. You've got Doc Rivers, who's been in a basketball locker room for 30 years, Sam Cassell, Dan Burke, Popeye, et cetera, et cetera. So there was an accountability problem. And a main reason why they're winning this year and doing so well with chemistry is because they're all being held accountable. So Jay Rich had a point. I don't think he was wrong to complain about Brett Brown and the lack of accountability. But yeah, Jay Rich as a basketball player is exactly who we know and thought he was. His game is just dependent on other players. He's not necessarily an individual contributor.
Someone I remember told me that they're like, yeah, he's going to be an all-star. And I'm thinking like you talking about the same guy?
Yeah. Not the Josh Richardson I know.
No, definitely not. And just like it shows how bad of a fit he was in here in Philly, because he just was not even close to what they needed. And then you're exactly right. He needs others to be like really good in order for him to be good. He can't be good independent of others. And they needed him to sort of be that guy, which he wasn't. Now let's go real quick. I thought like in that Dallas game, I mean, Danny Green's hitting those threes. Danny Green now from the corners is slowly becoming the guy that you kind of trust the most from three, which is terrifying. I mean, whenever he gets the ball in the corners, my feet kind of like squeeze themselves a little bit. I don't know. My toes, like you know how you flex your toes like that sometimes. Yeah. They do that whenever he shoots the three because I'm like, okay, I'm confident this is going to go in, and then it does. With everybody else, I'm like, oh, I don't know, and I'm kind of like, I'm sort of like, whenever they shoot. But that game, like, I think Jimmy Lynam really said this well last night, and shout out to Coach Jimmy. If there's anyone I could have a beer with, it would be Jimmy Lynam.
That's tragic.
He just sounds like the man. He just sounds like the absolute man. Jimmy Lynam with the classic Philly accent. I love it. But he was saying, like, you push the pace and, you really work down that shot clock. And when you do that, it makes it way harder for half-court defenses to function properly because they're expending energy trying to keep you, contained. And if you're not wasting shot clock, that means that they're able to get back on offense and pressure more. And what?
It's almost like I've been saying this for 2 years. The Sixers have been top 10 since 2015 in shot clocks, in attempts very early in the shot clock. If you're not taking time off of that shot clock, if you're just coming down and chucking threes, you don't have an offense. There is no offensive structure. Now the Sixers have an offense, and you know what their identity is. They're going to bully the shit out of the other team.
So let me ask you this then. What are they this year in shots taken early in the shot clock?
I think they're still up there, but the volume is a little different. So they're still one of the teams with the highest frequency there, but the volume's different. The type of shots are different. Those shots, I think, are mainly just Ben pushing pace and getting guys open in three, or Tobias doing the same because they're some of the most productive players in transition. But what you don't see is like Shake Milton or Joel Embiid just dribbling down the court and shooting a three. You very rarely see that this season.
Yeah. But like I thought they generally did a really good job against Dallas of kicking ahead, in transition. They got really open looks, and I'll rarely fault a three in transition if it's like, okay, there's one guy back and you're kicking ahead to a shooter, because that's really basically just one-on-one basketball. If it gets to like 3 or 4-on-1, like it was with the Nuggets the other night, and they lost that game.
That was our guy too, Campazzo or
Facundo,
bro. That was our guy.
They call him Faku or Faku, and I'm thinking like, ooh, that's a little tight. I don't know if I can get away with that on the air. But they call him Faku, and he was so open, he was surprised that, and he just missed it way long. But that was a situation where you're like, that's unacceptable. That needs to be a dunk by Michael Porter Jr. Like when you're kicking ahead to like one guy, and that one guy's it's only him and one other defender back, shoot it. Who cares? But they were getting to the rim generally when the lanes were there. And I thought everything else was just like, okay, they're moving the ball around, they're getting open looks. And if they're missing, like I can't fault them for that. Like that's just basketball. It really just goes back to what I said earlier in the show, but we'll get to that, again soon. Now let's go over to some comments here. Nadir says, Austin, are you going to ask Doc why he intentionally threw you reporters off? I sense a little bit of a tone here with Nadir. A little bit of like,
what's the backstory?
So Doc said like last week, like, yeah, Furkan's going to be out of the rotation. It's going to be Isaiah Joe. He didn't say those exact words, but he basically kind of implied it.
Okay.
And lo and behold, like 3 or 4 days later, Isaiah Joe's going to the D League, or the G League as they call it now. And Furkan's obviously going to be staying there.
Okay, I see.
And I guess it might have been the very next game he comes back and has 16 points in the first quarter.
Mm-hmm.
I guess another component could be like, they just sort of don't trust. They don't trust Isaiah as much as they previously did. But I mean, it was a very crazy turn of events. So I'm sure that if I don't get to ask him about it, someone else will. And I'm sure he'll have an answer like, some logical, well-founded reason, like, oh, I thought this, but then this,
I feel like that was probably motivated by either just wanting to get him more time, more touches and opportunities, or there's a trade on the horizon, which I think both are real plausible.
I texted somebody who's close to the team, and I asked them, like about like trade scenario. As I was like, does that mean that they're going to do a trade? We'll discuss trades at the end.
Yeah,
it didn't seem like, from what I had been told, that it was like a trade was on the horizon real quickly. But who knows? Now I do want to discuss Embiid's mini slump a little bit. 14 of 53 is not something we've seen from him too often. But over this last week, it feels like he has missed a ton of shots around the rim. I don't know if he's just trying to rush a little bit because he knows that like teams are going to be doubling him or like putting immense pressure on him down low. I don't know why. It feels like he's kind of rushing, and as a result, he's missing shots. But there are some times when he had really good, like he like sealed off in the post, turned, and like just flat out and missed. I thought a lot of that happened yesterday, even with the 41 points. But the Dallas game, the Raptors games, I feel like he just missed a lot of bunnies around the rim.
Yeah, Joe got his shot opportunities, especially against Dallas. There were misses that were short, which might be indicative of a little bit of fatigue. He might not have his legs under him completely, but I'm not worried about Joe at all. This is still the most valuable player, the most dominant player in the league at the moment, in my opinion. And it's unfair to hold Luka to this standard where we say, Luka just had an off night. Ben didn't clamp him. He was getting doubles all night. I saw people saying that. It's unfair to hold players to that standard, but then get mad when Embiid has a 14 of 53 span where he's getting double or tripled every time he touches the ball. I mean, he can't even dribble into his positioning. He can't work into the post because there's two defenders on him as soon as he touches it. So he's really got one option. Get rid of it before this is potentially a turnover. Joe did get to some of the spots, and there were some misses from point blank that you normally see Joe make with 56, 57% accuracy. But like I said, I'm not worried at all. Aaron Baines has a 7'3 wingspan. He's tough. He's physical. And his game is predicated upon that physicality. He's a bruiser defensively. So he had a hand in Joe's face at all times. Pascal Siakam got physical. Van Vliet got physical. And in the Dallas game, Boban might not be the most physical big, but he's got a long wingspan too. So Joe's like playing basketball with a Nerf ball and a Nerf net. Everything's easy for him. He's shooting over defenses. It's like a little children's game for him. But when you've got guys with 7'3", 7'5", 7'8" wingspans getting a hand in his face, it's going to throw his game off. And it doesn't happen often, but that's what you saw. I still think it's huge that the Sixers won 2 of those 3 games, which he turned in his 3 worst shooting performances.
For sure. Now, Brock, before we get into the game last night, the Cleveland game,
Yeah.
Obviously Ben hits the 3 at the end, and from what I could tell on Twitter, there were some people who were celebrating because they had won their parlay. There were many that were like, "Are you kidding me? That just cost me the parlay." Don't have to worry about parlays anymore with Thrive Fantasy Sports. With Thrive Fantasy, you can come hashtag prop up on Thrive Fantasy this season. Thrive Fantasy is a daily fantasy sports app for player props. They have eliminated the need to do countless hours of research because they only ask you about the top tier athletes in a respective sport. I know NFL season just came to an end, but when that comes back around, choose 10 out of the 20 player prop options to build your lineup. If it's NBA, MLB's coming around the corner. Spring training begins this week. PGA or even esports. Choose 5 out of the 10 player prop options to build your lineup. Each prop has a fantasy point total associated with the over or under based on its likelihood to occur. The more points a selection is worth, the riskier it is. That's how it goes in life. Rack up the most points to win a share of the prize pool. Use promo code Simmons43. That's Simmons43. The word 4 spelled out FOR. 3, number 3, Simmons43. When you sign up today, and you will receive an instant deposit that match up to $50 on your first deposit of $20 or more. Download Thrive Fantasy on the App Store or Play Store, or by visiting their website, www.thrivefantasy.com. Sign up and hashtag prop up today. Now, let's get into the last game of this week. We have the Cleveland game, and I got to tell you, that was an infuriating game. I mean, as someone who tries to be an objective reporter, I can see why any fan would just be going crazy over that. Ultimately, when you're in first place, there's not a lot of games that are really going to be fatally, wound you in a fatal way. But that was a game that you look down towards the end of the season, that they're a game and a half back with 3 games to play. That could be a game like shit. That was the one to get. And I just thought last night, and I think, Doc said it, Joel said it, Ben said it. They just didn't have energy last night. And that's been kind of a rarity this season for them. I think over the course, Doc's been a really good job of motivating them when they, for games and building them up. But in the past, obviously, it was a major issue. They would play on opponents pretty often, and it would cost them. But last night, they were down basically the entire game. And they got back into it. They took the lead late. They really couldn't build anything on consistent possessions. They got the lead, and then they would come down. Cavaliers would miss. Sixers would get the ball back, and they couldn't capitalize. They turned it over. They missed a shot themselves. So they really just couldn't put any kind of pressure or put Cleveland on the ropes at all. And ultimately, that really cost them in that game last night. And it was certainly a frustrating game, especially from a shooting perspective. I think they shot. What did they shoot last night?
That's what I'm looking for right now. It wasn't pretty.
Well, Seth shot 1 of 13.
I think Danny Green and Seth were a combined 4 of 22. That's what I'm trying to confirm right now.
Gotta love that.
So the Sixers as a team shot 38 of 84, so 45%, 10 of 28 from 3, 35.
Right on their average.
Right on average, and they didn't make more than 6 first half threes, so most of those threes came in the second half. And between Danny Green and Seth Curry, the two of them made 4 shots on, I believe, a combined 22 attempts. Yeah, it was 22. Seth Curry, 13 shots, Danny Green, 9 shots. So that's really the problem right there. You have a game where Ben Simmons takes 17 shots. He hits 24 points. He goes to the line 4 times, 7 rebounds, 8 assists, whatever. He had a good enough line. Joel Embiid, 42 points, right? He went to the line and took 16 free throw attempts on 60% shooting from the field. Joel Embiid and Ben Simmons couldn't have done anything differently. There was a lack of energy. I think maybe this is a trap game. You played Dallas real well on national TV. Everybody loves Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid again. You've got Indiana coming up, who's a better playoff team and better position than the team the Sixers just faced. And they lose a game to Cleveland, who is a bottom barrel team at the moment. The energy wasn't there. I'm not looking at this game as a source of concern because I've seen what I've had to see. The proof is in the pudding. I keep saying that this team is good enough physically and with their talent to bully anybody. They are a nightmare to match up with because if the Sixers break a 5-on-5 game down into one-on-one matchups, they're favorable for Philadelphia probably 7 or 8 times out of 10. Tobias, Joe, Ben are going to attack the mismatch and win it probably 7 or 8 times a game. If the other Sixers on the floor can't capitalize when the Sixers produce these number advantages out in transition, off a double team, off of a turnover, they just aren't going to be able to win. The Sixers got to knock down those shots. To consider the other 2 players on the floor at the time, Danny Green and Seth, who are supposed to be those players to capitalize, went 4 of 22. That's just not going to cut it. So it doesn't matter how many free throws you missed, how many turnovers, this or that. You need to capitalize when those shots are there.
Yeah, and you say that like that you're not worried about them and that the proof is in the pudding. The proof that I saw today says that they're a top 5 defensive team, which I think they're probably a little better than that, to be honest. I think their defense last couple of weeks has been really, 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 really good. Last night the teams were tied at 92 at the end of the fourth quarter. And I mean, how often do we see it now where teams have 100-plus points by the end of the third quarter? So, I think the defense is getting really, really good. They're still an average at best offense, and that has to change. That won't cut it. And I know you're optimistic. It's not going to cut it.
I don't think it's like you're not being pessimistic, but I've seen people are calling the Sixers mediocre.
I saw that.
Their roster is poorly constructed. It's like people just come up with this crazy shit, and the unfortunate thing is that everybody has a voice. Everybody has an opinion on social media. Now, that freedom of speech isn't unfortunate, but the unfortunate thing is we're talking about basketball here. And it's not football where people don't understand the X's and O's, or it's not baseball where people can't comprehend the box score. This is basketball. Everyone thinks they know the game of basketball, so everyone has an opinion. The Sixers aren't a poorly constructed roster. They're not a mediocre team. What you have is 3 players that are going to attack and win a mismatch almost every time. There's nobody that can guard Joel Embiid one-on-one. If Ben Simmons continues to play like this, where he wants it, he's applying pressure early, he's getting downhill with that cross and his game in the post, there's no player that will be guarding him that can defend him. So when I say that, yeah, there's the Kawhi Leonards or there's the occasional defender that comes around and shuts Ben down. But, I mean, how often are you going to get a defender that can lace up and stop a 6'10" freight train if he takes 17 shots a game? There's just not many defenders that could stop that. And Tobias Harris is 6'8". The position he plays at just generates some mismatches all the time. So he's going to be working on a 21-year-old, a 24-year-old, a 26-year-old. He's been in the league 10 years, okay? I don't know if this is true. This just kind of threw my thought process off, this little breaking news Woj rumor, but I'm not buying it. What I'm saying is the Sixers have 3 players that make matching up with them a problem, okay? So all you have to do now is get either a consistent dead-eye shooter to capitalize on those number advantages or either a couple more bench pieces, right? And I think the Sixers are going to do that. But they don't have to take this back to the drawing board. They don't have to change their offensive philosophy or their approach. If they play the Lakers, if they play the Clippers, if they play Brooklyn, if they play Utah, they're going to have 2 of the 3 best players on the floor at all times against any contending team except those guys. But they need to get the guys that are going to capitalize on the threes so when they do play the Clippers, the Nets, Utah, those teams, they'll be able to create real separation. Or if LeBron's not on the floor, Mitchell's not on the floor, someone's not on the floor, their bench can create separation. But they're not a poorly constructed team. This is the blueprint. You've got the blueprint. This is what the good teams, the winning teams do. The Sixers are playing a copycat league. They're copying the blueprint. Their roster's not poorly constructed. They need a few minor tweaks. They're not mediocre. I'd argue that the second or third best offense in basketball based on how they attack. They're playing bully ball. No one else can guard that. So people are just acting like this shit's the end of the world. Like, relax. There's 72 games. If you see problems with the bench, if you see problems with the shooter, trust me, the people in charge of this, the people that get paid to do this, they see it too. You don't have to tweet at them and bother them all day. They see it. It's their job.
That's something that I find that so stupid. Like, yeah, he's not. It's not going to be the 511th time someone's tweeted at him. He's like, okay, I give up. Yeah, let's just trade everything.
This guy said, he sent me an intriguing trade machine with the Kings. I'll call them up. Like, it's his job. This is how he feeds his family. If you see a problem, the GM sees it too.
Yeah. I don't think that they're flawed in construction or that they're poorly constructed. Like, I think that the skill sets align really well. Mm-hmm. I think they're somewhat flawed in maybe mental makeup. Like, if for guys like Ben and Joel, you need people that are going to be unconscious about pulling the trigger on outside looks. You need, you need a team like the Bucks in some sense where they're just going to shoot it and shoot it and shoot it and shoot it some more. I think at times Tobias is good, and Tobias has been great. He was on my all-star list. But he's at times a little hesitant from deep. Seth's really hesitant from deep. And I think you just need more three-point shooting from them. And if not them, go out and get someone like a JJ Redick. It's not going to cost you much. Willard Robinson, speaking of another trade target, Kyle Lowry. I can just tell you right now, I don't see a world where Toronto wants to trade interdivision to a rival interconference. I damn sure don't see it in a year where they have play-in seeds, where you have a chance to make the playoffs as the 9 and 10th seed. People are going to be in till the very last week, and I just don't see it. I think it's going to be something like maybe Nemanja Bjelica, or I think like JJ could be an option. I mean, the Pelicans are playing better. They're getting back into it. The Bulls are getting back into it. The dream of getting Zach LaVine, I think, is now shot, considering he's now like a certified all-star. He's now a real all-star, and you're not going to be able to pull like Danny Green, Matisse Thybulle, Shake Milton, and some picks for
bag of chips
for Zach LaVine. It's just not going to happen. I think Wayne Ellington could be an option for sure. But you just need some guys that are just unconscious from deep. And I saw the tweet you're talking about. Another thing that I saw was like, so a couple people have said they've now beaten 2 teams out of 8 that are above 500. So like they're basically 2-6 against teams that are above 500. What if the Celtics win 2 in a row? They're above 500, and now you have 4 wins out of.
It's just a stupid game, right? It's a propaganda game. That's what this media game is. I mean, you know it, I know it. All we're really doing is just spreading propaganda, and we're trying to tell things straight and be objective and keep it real. But there's people that are allowed to do that. So it's like, yeah, they are 2-6 against teams that have 500 plus records or whatever. And when you see that tweet, you're not going to think about those games. You're just, 2-6. They can't beat winning.
So it's a fact, but it's like a flawed fact in that if one team, like the Celtics, win 2 games in a row, they're 18-17. Now you've beaten 3 teams.
Yeah, what I'm saying too is like you might be like, well, one of those losses is the Denver Nuggets. Well,
right.
You don't remember what happened when the Sixers
Jazz, and you didn't have Embiid.
It was like. When you see that, you just think, wow, 2-6, they're not good against winning teams. And the person who tweeted it can use that to their advantage. Well, look, the Sixers have to – well, that's not the story. When they've played the Lakers, they looked like they could keep up with the champs who just won the finals, didn't it? When they played Utah without Joel Embiid, they almost put Utah in shambles and won that game late. Okay, so there's just certain things like, yeah, it's propaganda, but it's up to you as a viewer of it to say, I'm going to believe this. I'm not going to believe it. I'm going to take it serious. I'm not. It's up to you.
Yeah.
But I think all of this overreaction is stupid, and it's just unnecessary. But
So we do have a couple more topics to hit. First is, so when it comes down to it, like, can you continue to start Seth Curry and Danny Green? I think that should be enough right there to tell you, and you can't.
So I think they're starting the chemistry between the starting five is something I don't want to mess with.
By the way, the starting five now has the number one offensive rating, or no, the number one net rating of all five man units in the NBA that have played any kind of minutes together.
That's why I don't want to mess with it, because there's all these different roles. So what I think needs to happen is the Sixers need to find an upgrade for one of them, but it doesn't necessarily mean they have to trade him. I don't think the Sixers want to trade Seth Curry. He's not going to be in any trade talks unless it's a needle-moving player. Then Philadelphia, sure, they put anybody on the table. But I don't think they want to trade Danny Green either. I think he brings that veteran presence. He's one of the few shooters in the league who can have an 0-15 night and still take 20 shots the next game. And the role definition is crucial. Those are two players that understand I'm on the floor strictly to bail my teammates out. When there's a double team, I have to hit this three. I have to be in the corner. I have to pass it and space the floor. I have to pass it and cut to space They understand their roles. So I don't think the Sixers need to trade one of them or even want to and go get a guy that's going to bring something completely different. What they need to do is get something or somebody, I should say, like Danny Green or like Seth Curry that can do all of those things and understand what they have to do, but just hit those shots a little more consistently. And if you do that, then maybe you move Seth Curry to the bench, and all of a sudden your bench is a lot stronger now. Instead of scoring 20 a game, your bench now gets an 11-point boost. They might be scoring 30, 40 a game on some nights. You move Danny Green to the bench, and it's a lot worse than having him start. You might be okay with Danny Green going 3 for 8 off of the bench as opposed to as a starter from 3. So I don't really think the team even wants to do too much. I don't think they want to trade Seth. I don't think they want to trade Danny Green, Shake Milton. But if they have to, they have to. Ultimately, though, I don't think that you can win a championship with both of them starting unless they're shooting unconscious. Like we both said, you got to be shooting unconscious with no second thoughts. But if you can somehow get like a Malik Beasley, which won't happen, or like a Buddy Hield or an Evan Fournier, I'm just giving names, an automatic shooter that will shoot with no hesitation off of double teams, that's what I think makes them a championship contending team entirely.
I think the Fournier thing's an interesting idea because they're pretty far below 500. And he's going to be an expiring. That's an interesting idea. That might be something that they have in the books. I'll have to check out on that one. But I think so. Here's what I see it. I think I think you can start one, but can't start both anymore. And I think the better one to keep is Seth, obviously, because he's younger, and his contract is awesome. But with Green, I don't think he's the type of guy that you can like replace in the lineup and then also have him like actually play well off the bench. My guess is if you tried to bench Green and for an upgraded player, you would just see his numbers plummet. And I think he's the kind of guy that he best fits as a starter for whatever reason. So maybe they trade him and maybe they involve him in a trade package or what. Maybe I'm wrong. I just think the better one to keep in the starting lineup is Seth, and I think the one that you would be more inclined to maybe trade would be Danny. But we shall see. But I do think they have to upgrade that one of those spots, and I like the idea of Evan Fournier for them. Did you notice that they pulled drop coverage in overtime?
When, last night?
Yeah, I thought that was the most ridiculous thing ever because, first of all, Darius Garland and Colin Sexton are tough. They're quick, they're herky-jerky, they can dribble, they can burst, they can shoot it a little bit from outside, and they were playing drop coverage, and they were just getting floaters and floaters and floaters.
That's what the Sixers do, and they're comfortable there. That's what a lot of teams are comfortable doing. But I think when they play like a Damian Lillard, a Devin Booker, or Luka, what you're going to see is that double or that hedging when screens come. Because, like I said, if you're a point guard and you've got two dudes 7 feet tall hawking you down, your vision is shot. Your lanes to the basket are shot. You have to depend on your teammates. So the Sixers are forcing those points into bad decisions. Last night they abandoned drop coverage, but defensively, last night was just a lack of effort, a lack of energy, and that's what defense is. It's all effort. But I'm not overreacting. I've seen what I need to see.
Fair enough. The last one from Dion Fussell. Trade for Lowry and sign Cousins with a shake. Be Delty.
Boogie.
I think Brock might buy a jersey if Boogie comes.
If Boogie is in Philly, I'm the first one to buy a jersey, no doubt. That's my boy right there. The only thing that complicates that is Dwight, because Dwight's been awesome. He's been top 3 among bench players in offensive boards and total rebounds. He's top 8 in blocks among bench players. So what he brings just in terms of his presence on the floor and off the court, you need him in Philadelphia, and you need him on a championship team. Boogie, is he a guy that can play the 4 and stretch the floor like that? I don't know, and I don't know if he wants to be playing 12 minutes a game as a stretch 4. So him in Philly might not make that much sense. Kyle Lowry, though, at his best is going to give you 17 a game, 5 rebounds, 7 assists, 2 steals maybe. And during the finals run, those were his numbers. He shot 38% from 3 in the final. So despite what the narrative was in his first couple of playoff appearances, he was good enough, obviously, for Toronto to win a championship, and he would make complete sense in Philadelphia. Like Austin said, though, Toronto, one of the hottest teams in the NBA in the past month. They're only getting better. His fit with everybody on that team makes sense. He had a good game. I think he had a triple-double and balled out the other night. So Toronto might not trade him, but if they do, Philadelphia will definitely be prepared to offer. Like I said, you need to have trust in the guys that do this for a living because it's their job. So if they see holes, they're going to try to fill them.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised that Boston hasn't already signed Boogie.
Well, Boston's close to signing and trading for every player in the league. You know that they just missed them. They just miss every player.
Right, they're close and always.
How about Boston, man? You would think a team with Kyrie, with Al Horford, Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, Marcus Smart, Gordon Hayward. That sounds like a championship-winning team. That team could be pretty nasty. I wonder what Boston would look like if they had all those guys.
For sure.
They already did. They didn't win anything.
Well, he is Brock Landis. I am Austin Krell. Can find me on Twitter at NBA Krell. Can find him on Twitter at Landis Brock. You can follow the P2 Embiid on Twitter at the P2 Embiid. We're also on Instagram under the same handle. You can subscribe to the Painted Lines on YouTube to get to find our show there. Apple Pods as well, and SoundCloud. As always, we appreciate you all tuning in. And we hope you have a great rest of your weekend. Shout out to my mom. That is her birthday today. She is the one responsible for bringing this gift to the world. So,
how was the real quickly, you got to elaborate on that alligator story because I saw that. I peeped that on Twitter, right? You were holding an alligator. That's my biggest – if you want to know what my biggest fear on the planet is other than heights, it's alligators, reptiles. I hate them.
You don't like sharks? Are you do like sharks?
Shark's not a reptile.
I know that no, obviously
I'd much rather run into a shark than an alligator.
Really?
Really, because alligators, listen, they got, I think, the hardest jaw pressure in the entire animal kingdom. Have you ever seen a gator roll? Bro.
How the hell do you know that?
Because, listen, I gotta keep a pulse on everything.
You got a stat for everything. You got a stat for everything.
Alligator. Like you ever seen a gator roll? If you haven't seen one, you got to look up a gator roll. They're the nastiest move in the animal kingdom.
Gators lead the reptilian league with jaw pressure.
Yeah, they do.
Yeah, my baby cousin's down here in Florida for the weekend. Going to take her on some unusual adventures. So we took her on fan boat tours, and they took us in this lake, and they were just like, we saw 4 crocodiles or 4 gators in a very small period of time. So it was quite the adventure for sure. Yeah. But I ended up holding one. The guy was like, all right, I'm going to take the band off his mouth now. And then he takes the band off. The thing's mouth this opens all the way up. And
bro, alligators all. I'm telling you, if they don't have the deadliest jaw pressure in the animal kingdom, it's one of. And a gator roll, bro, a gator will suffocate. Like they will drown you underwater while simultaneously rolling your body like a rag doll and then eat you to shreds in a musty ass swamp. I don't like alligators at all, bro. The frequency of alligators and snakes in Florida keeps me away from that state.
Fair enough. Brock, what do you got going on?
I got a lot actually. We just got a Roadcaster mixing board, so I'm planning to just be going crazy with the content. I want to do a league recap every week, so we're going to see if we can pull that off. Still doing the breakdowns for the Sixers game. I got a big Ben Simmons piece with comps for the All-Star game. Still the feed to Embiid. So there's going to be plenty coming. Just make sure to keep supporting and showing love because I appreciate it, and we're going to keep that return on investment pretty high.
There we go. I am obviously covering the beat every day of my life, so that's typically most of my content, and then my weekly column for Last Out. So you can always find me there. As always, Brock Landis, Austin Krell coming to you from the feed to Embiid. Stay solid, baby.
Sure.
Appreciate support. We'll see you next week for another episode of the feed to Embiid.